Good evening, everyone. Today we'll start with the fourth unit, resource allocation. There are 5 topics in resource allocation: basic concept of resource allocation problem, types of resources, work resource, material resource, cost resource loading, and resource leveling. So these are the 5 topics we'll be discussing. Mainly, what this chapter will be discussing about is the type of resources which an organization has and how allocation of these resources are to be done within the project so that optimal utilization of the resources can be done and maximization of wealth and profit can be done. So that is why resource allocation is very important for the proper utilization, for the optimum utilization of resources. So here we go. What is resource allocation? Resource allocation is a process in which a company decides where it wants to place its scarce resources. The overall strategy is to produce goods and services that match customer preferences for the lowest possible cost of production so that resources can be maximized. What are the basic resources? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, information and data, time, energy. So these are basic resources. 3 M's we call in management term, that is known as men, material, and machine. These are resources, and other resources except these are work resource, material resource, and cost resource. We'll discuss these in detail in coming slides. What are the 12 tips for allocating resources? First of all, know your scope, know the scope of the project, identify resources, don't procrastinate, don't postpone things. Think holistically, think about the whole project as a whole, organization as a whole. No resource dependencies, know about how much you are dependent on what resource and what kind of dependency do you have. Track time, use tools to maximize the optimum utilization of resources. Don't over allocate. If you are over allocating any resource to any particular process, then you are wasting your optimal resources. Be realistic, don't be optimistic, don't be pessimistic. Have a routine, make things in routine. Know your resources and use resource reports. So in a routine, you make your resources known to yourself, and then you make your resource reports so that it can be communicated to the higher authorities. Resource allocation framework and steps. Steps of resource allocation are: determine the aim and scope of decision making, identify prior setting committee. So if first you identify the aim and scope of decision making, then you identify priority setting committee, then clarify existing resource mix, what are the resource mixes you have. Then you develop decision criteria with stakeholders input, so you develop decision criteria. Then you identify and rank funding options, communicate decisions and rationale, provide formal decision review process, evaluate and improve. There are 6 steps to performing a proper resource allocation. Divide the project into tasks. So first of all, you have to divide your project into tasks and assign the resources. Determine the resource attributes. What are the resource attributes and what kind of resources are required? Then resource leveling. Wherever you've allocated more resources, from there you take out the resources and you allocate to the place where you've allocated less of resource. Then reallocate as necessary, reallocate if it is possible, and then track resource utilization. So always track resource utilization. Make sure that any of the process does not suffer due to under provision of resources, and also the resources should not be getting waste because of over allocation of resources. So now, what are the problems of resource allocation? Limited resources and unlimited demand. So, the resources are always limited, and there are unlimited want of resources. Financing productive sectors versus enabling sectors. So, there are various enabling sectors which are very important for the running of the business, and productive sectors are the sectors which give you more profit. Then, poor prioritization of resources at sectoral level. Allocative inefficiency. Sometimes you have resources, but you allocate it in an inefficient manner. Then project dependencies. What are the project dependencies? On what all factors the project depends? What are the resources on which the project depends? Project uncertainties. What are the uncertainties related to project? Then uncover risk. Continuous tracking of resources. Change in client preference. Resource wastage both normal and abnormal. There can be resource wastage as well. The schedule focusing more on time rather than on resources. So schedules normally they focus on time and they rather lead to, and because they want to make it faster and faster, it leads to unnecessary wastage of resources. The time itself is a critical resource, so time itself is very important. Then resource allocation, you make an institutional plan, a plan for the whole institute. Then you make for program plans, so you make it for a specific program. Then you implement these plans in the form of budget projections and financial forecasts and annual budget development. So these are the ways in which you implement your plans, your program plans and institutional plans. Then you execute the project and you assess outcome and measures of the environmental scanning, and again you make the plans. So planning, implementation, execution and assessment. So that is how it goes on with resource allocation problem. And types of resources, if you look into this, there are n number of resources. Mainly three types of resources are there: natural, human, and man-made. Human-made, natural are human resources are human resources. It consists of people. It consists of people who are working for you. Then human-made resources, these are the artificial resources made by the human being. Natural resources, it consists of based on origin, biotic and abiotic. Biotic means living, abiotic means non-living. Based on utility, renewable and non-renewable. Renewable resources like sun, tide, which can be used again and again. Non-renewable resources, if once used, cannot be used again. For example, coal. Based on level of development potential, and actual potential means it is still not cannot be used, though it has potential source of resource, and actual means actual resource is available for the final utilization. Based on distribution, localized and ubiquitous, so there can be resource available localized, and ubiquitous, it cannot be available local in a localized manner. Then based on ownership, individual, there can be individual resource, national resource, community resource and international resource. It is on the basis of ownership. Who is the owner? If individual is the owner, then it is individual resource. If nation is the owner, then it has to be national resources. Community is the owner, then community resource. And internationally, if it belongs to all communities, then it is international resource. Work resources include people and equipment related to the people. So work resources is nothing but human resources and the equipments used by them. Then cost resources are financial costs associated with the task, travel expense, for expense, etc. Then material resource, consumables used in the project proceeds. For example, paint being used while painting a wall. So consumables used are called as material resources. Then resource loading, now you have identified the place where you can put on your resource. Now you have to load your activities with the resources. So resource loading is basically allocating resources to the activities at the right time. Project manager, with the help of the resource loading, can calculate the employee working hours and do the allocation of various tasks. Resource loading is a technique for plunging time, material and workforce needs into the schedule to see what is needed where, when and for how long. For instance, in construction project, we may estimate that 1 lakh square feet of dry well need to be installed in a 2 week period. Critical path is a common time of technique used by project managers when it comes to resource leveling. The critical path represents for both the longest and the shortest time duration paths in the network diagram to complete the project. However, apart from widely used critical path concept, project managers use fast tracking and crashing if things get out of hand. Fast tracking, this performs critical path tasks, thus buys time. The prominent feature of this technique is that although the work is completed for the moment, possibility of network is rework is higher. Then crashing, this refers to assigning resources in addition to existing resources to get work done faster, associated with additional costs such as labor, equipment, etc. So fast tracking, what you do is here you buy time, and the prominent feature of this technique is that although the work is completed for the moment, possibility of rework is higher because you are doing it in you're fast tracking the project. Then in crashing, you're assigning resources more than what is required to complete your project on time. or in better time. So now resource loading, steps of stores resource loading: identify the activities and events in the project, draw the network diagram, mark the quantity and quality of the resources required for completing each activity within the time frame decided, ensure timely availability of required resources in a proper quantity, allocate the resources as decided to various activities of the project, keep some resources as buffer, make contingency plan for resource procurement, execute the project and control the resource utilization in each activity on the basis of budget and resource allocation made as per plan, feedback and periodic inventory check, resource leveling and wherever required. Now, resource leveling is a technique in project management that overlooks resource allocation and resolves possible conflict arising from resource over allocation. So, when project managers undertake a project, they need to plan their resources accordingly. This will benefit the organization without having to face conflicts and not being able to deliver on time. Resource leveling is considered one of the key elements of resource management in the organization. An organization starts to face problem business, resources are not allocated properly, some resources may be over allocated while others may be under allocated. Both will bring about a financial risk to the organization because you're using your resources and you're not making the proper products. The two main approaches of resource labeling are a time constrained approach in which time is fixed and you can maximize the resource to produce the things on time or before time. The resource constrained approach where resource is limited and then you try to save your resources and don't worry about the time. And that is known as resource constraint approach. Resource leveling techniques are CPM, fast tracking. I'm sorry, just hold on for a second. Fast tracking, crashing, and critical chain method. Now, smoothing versus leveling. Resource smoothing: time limited scheduling. For example, you've got limited time, so you have a fixed end date. Now you have unlimited resources, so what you can do is you can put in more resources to complete your project on time. So unlimited resources, moving activities with their fee and total slack to achieve a smooth and manageable resource profile across the project without using more the project and the date. Now you develop a schedule and develop a schedule. Then resource allocation here. Resource leveling has resource limiting schedule, where you can move your end date but your resources are limited. So what you normally do is you try to save your resources and you try to finish maybe sooner or later than the schedule, but you try to save your resources for each and every process which is required to complete the project. Resource leveling versus resource smoothing. Limited scheduling technique. Importance is given to the limited resources. So in leveling, resources are limited. Smoothing, time limited scheduling technique. So here time is limited. Resource removes all resource conflict. Remove as much resource conflict as possible, but may not remove all resource conflict because this is resource limited and this is time limited. May not require additional resources. In resource leveling, you may not require additional resources, but in resource smoothing, may require additional resources to address leftover resource conflict. Activities may be shifted beyond the float available while rescheduling the activities. Activities are shifted only to the extent of the float available. Generally, the project duration extended because time is not very important here. The project duration remains the same because time scheduling is very important here. May change the critical path, and there cannot be any change in the critical path because time is a constraint and time is the main factor which is guiding the resource smoothing. And in resource leveling, resource is the main thing which is guiding the activities of the firm. So that is how it is. Now project resource management process. So here we have a plan, a resource management, the process of defining how to estimate, acquire, manage and utilize physical and team resources. Estimate activity resources, the process of estimating team resources, the type and quantities of material, equipment and supplies necessary to complete project work. Acquire resources, the process of obtaining team members, facilities, equipments, materials, supplies, and other resources necessary to complete project work. Develop team, the process of improving competencies, team member interaction, and the overall team environment to enhance project performance. Manage team, the process of tracking team member performance, providing feedback, resolving issues, and managing team members to optimize project performance. Control resources, the process of ensuring that the physical resources assigned and allocated to the project are available as planned, as well as monitoring the planned versus actual use of resources and performing corrective actions as necessary. Now, Planned resource management is the first and initial step of project resource management knowledge area. It involves various aspects like defining the process of estimating, acquiring, managing, and using physical and human resources. This process is usually performed only once or at few predetermined points throughout the project lifestyle to help in establishing the way of approach and level of management required for managing resources. These aspects are majorly influenced by the type and complexity of the project. So here you have the project charter as the input, project management plans, project documents, enterprise environment factors, and organizational process are set as inputs. Then what are the tools? Tools are expert judgment, data interpretation, organizational theory and meeting, data representation. You have hierarchical charts, responsibility assignment and metrics, and output would be resource management plan, team charter, project document updates, assumption log, and risk register. So then estimate activity resource. Once you're done with planning, the next process is estimate activity resources. In this process, the resources required for the project, along with the type and quantity of tools, equipment, raw material, and supplies, are being estimated. This process is generally executed after specific time intervals throughout the project life cycle. With this, you can pinpoint what type of resources you need, in what amounts, and what should be their characteristics in order to finish the project successful. So here you have project management plan, project document, enterprise environment factor, organizational process assets, and they are converted into resource requirement, basis of enterprise, resource breakdown structure, project document update, activity attributes, assumption log, register, learned register, and what are the tools? Expert judgment, bottom up estimating, analogous estimate, parametric estimate, data analysis, project management information system, and meetings. So these are estimating activity resources. Then acquire resources. Acquire resources is the third process of project resource management knowledge area that deals with the collecting the various human resources, facilitating tools and equipment, supplies, and raw materials required to deliver the project. This process helps in outlining and guiding the selection process of the project resources and then assigning them to their specific activities, tasks. Thus, it is performed at periodic intervals throughout the project lifecycle and helps in preventing running out of resources. Now, here you input project management plans, project documents, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational processes. And you convert them into physical resource assignment, project team assignment, resource calendars, change requests, project management plans updates, project document updates, enterprise environment factors update, organizational process assets updates, and what are the tools? Decision making, interpersonal and team skills, pre-assessment, and virtual team. Now develop team. So this is next one. Next process of this knowledge area is to develop team. As the name suggests, this process purely concentrates on the development of the team bonding and assisting them with the rewarding work, future opportunities, and career development. It helps in enhancing the overall team performance by improving team member competencies, interactions, and environment. This process is performed throughout the project life cycle and intensifies teamwork, improves interpersonal skills of the individual, motivate them, and reduce attrition. So develop what input a project management plan, project document, enterprise resource factor, environmental factors, organizational process assets, and it converts into team performance assessment, change requests, project management plan updates, project documents update, enterprise environment factors and updates, organizational process assets update, and what are the tools called co-location. So co-location means you're allocated to your work at two places, and virtual teams, communication technology, interpersonal and team skills, recognition awards, training, individual and team assessment, and meetings. So these are the things through which we can build team. Now we have to manage team. Since the project management project team is acquired and developed, Next step is to manage them. In this process, each and every team member performs is monitored and tracked that their problem areas are identified, the issues are resolved, and feedbacks are given in order to optimize the project performance. This process generally performs throughout the project life cycle and helps in influencing the team behavior, managing the conflicts, and resolving brewing issues. Again, you have inputs as project management plan, project documents, work performance reports, team performance assessments, enterprise environment factors, organizational process assets, and tools used are interpersonal and team skills, leadership, project management, and output will be change requests, project management plan updates, project documents updates, and enterprise environmental factors update. Now, sixth one is control resources is the final point of project resource management knowledge area. And this process, the project managers ensure that the resources that are assigned and located for the project activities are monitor their estimate usage versus actual usage, subsequently take corrective action to keep the project on track. This process is implemented throughout the project life cycle and helps in ensuring that the necessary project resources are deployed to the correct places at the correct time and are released when the project comes to an end. Again, we've got the same inputs like project management plan, project documents, work performance and data agreements, organizational process assets. And output will be work performance, change requests, project management plan updates, project document updates, and tools and techniques used will be data analysis, problem solving, interpersonal and team analysis. So this is how control of resources is done. Now, benefits of resource management: optimum utilization of resources, increased revenue, helps in resolving internal conflicts, avoids unforeseen obstacles, enhances employee satisfaction, improves employee perfections performance, helps in quality training and development, better control of budget, and builds transparency. So this is the end of the fourth unit. It was a short unit and an easy one. I hope everyone will go through. Thank you.